Hello there. Now, if you hadn't realised that we now have a socialist government in charge of the UK, whatever we do or whoever we vote for, then you haven't been paying attention. Now, if you haven't already done so, please do subscribe and then like and comment below. Right now, the UK has record tax levels of the wrong kind because they're so high. We have a new record national debt every day as the government tries to be all things to all people and splurges as much money about as it can. We are seeing the continuation of a massive open doors policy causing an unprecedented rise in our population levels. A very underhanded way of redistributing the wealth of the country, by the way. And now, like something out of 1984, we have rising prices that are leaving the citizens seriously impoverished and living ever smaller and ever more controlled lives. And we have rising property prices that will leave many living in ever smaller accommodation. But our political masters have huge spending plans, most of which, like HS2, seems to be more about legacies, edifices and global wealth redistribution than actually helping the ordinary person in the street. And whatever promises are made by politicians, all we ever see is the exact opposite being executed. Look at immigration. Look at tax. Look at defence. Look at energy. Look at the red tape. And next it will be food. The whole lot seems designed to confuse us and just grind us down, 1984 style. And the country as a collective keeps voting for the same political parties time and time again. Look at London. The general citizenry are against this new massive ULEZ expansion, for example. But after what can only be seen as a sham consultation, the Mayor of London is forcing it through anyway. After all, he is your big brother and he knows what's best for you. They sell the concept of cheap electric cars to us, then later comes the truth about no electricity and slapping new taxes on them to keep the dosh going into the Treasury. And all this comes from a so-called Conservative Party, a party that is meant to be capitalist and conservative to its core. And how is the Tory reputation on upholding the law equally and fairly across the land faring? Talk about divide and conquer. And now there's talk that the Tories could do a Gordon Brown and raid private pension pots. Yes, the Institute for Fiscal Studies says that pension pots should be added to the estate of the dead to prevent the money being passed on untaxed to their heirs. So decades of financial planning could be wiped out at a stroke and only raise $1 billion a year for the taxman. But it will be welcomed by the Marxists, who would prefer a 100% inheritance tax anyway. But what will it do for the pensions industry? When people realise that the next move by government might reduce their post-retirement income, why would they put more money into a pension, knowing that the taxman will be eyeing it greedily for the next tax raid? People are more likely to say, hang it, and go and spend the money instead. Then the state will have to pick up the tab later. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the current lucrative public pension schemes being wound down as well in a few years too. Now I know this is just an IFS recommendation, but it's being given an airing. The kite is being flown to gauge reaction. Then when Labour gets in and increases inheritance tax like the good little socialists they are, people will find that the only beneficiary on any death is the state, despite whatever it says in anyone's will. The concept of self-reliance is being eroded to the point that everyone will rely on the state for everything. And if you are not reliant on the state, you will be deemed as a potential enemy of the state. If you are not already, that is. And then there's the net zero plan that will end up with everyone having a UN-inspired 2-ton per year carbon emission limit that will hammer them and force them to live, work and play, if they can afford to play, within 15 minutes of their allotted accommodation. Any prospect of self-improvement will die. You will own nothing and be happy, or else. Existence will be barely tolerable. But we'll be surrounded by big USSR-inspired statues of workers with hammers and sickles standing proud. And there will, of course, have to be a very small elite to lord it over us and make sure that we obey their laws, all for our own good, of course, while they live in the lap of luxury. And now for a further look at this creeping socialism in the UK. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Jeff, and good evening. Okay, folks, let's have a little fireside chat about how we are living in a Britain today that is heading towards a socialist state via a Conservative/Labour government. They're the same party working towards the same agenda. Don't be fooled. You see, as I was carefully putting a very damp log on the fire to try and melt away the ice from my cold, cold heart, I had a thought, and that is, I may live in the Brecon Beacons, but in the not-too-distant future, I could be living anywhere that the state tells me to, based on my perceived needs.
No, that'll never happen, I hear you cry. An Englishman's home is his castle.
No, it never was. You were just in the illusion thinking that it was. And as the state is now moving to turn your assets into your burdens, so your home will become a burden too. A burden too great to hold on to, because in the not-too-distant future, if your house doesn't meet energy efficiency targets, you will be fined, and fined heavily, to the point where you will hand your home back over to the state to prevent the costs mounting up for your green eco-fines. I would give you the source of my ludicrous claims, but I don't do detail, and for good reasons sometimes, which many of you will understand, so that I don't fall foul of the ghost in the machine, shall we say. But many of you enlightened little bunnies will know what I speak of anyway. Ah, dear viewers, we are becoming a socialist country, and very soon our needs will be determined by the government, and our material needs will be catered for accordingly. Now, you might think people are beginning to wake up and ask questions like, why do we have such a great level of wealth inequality, with the divide between the rich and poor increasing at a faster rate than ever before? But the problem is this: even people's perceived awakening is nothing more than a mechanism for controlling the masses, and I will elaborate. You see, the masses are being corralled together. Do you think the demands of nurses, postal workers and rail workers for increased pay won't spread to other workers across the economy? Of course it will. The people will now demand the impossible and unaffordable from a system that funds its public sector from borrowing, and whose private sector workers are now thinking, I want the same. And who can blame them if the state has become so powerful, intrusive and bloated that it can shut down society and businesses built up over lifetimes at a whim? Oh, and then pay people to stay at home. Well, the state can pay for everything then. Why would anyone want to work so hard just to have it taken away from them? But under the current system of borrowing to fund the public sector, the money is no longer there to meet so many of the growing demands of workers, at least not beyond 2 years after every penny has been taxed from the rich, and thus is wholly unsustainable. Unless, of course, we have a decentralized digital currency, just like the one that Rishi Sunak announced recently, where money has the potential to be created out of thin air. Oh, just like the banks do right now. But this time it will be done by the state. Oh dear viewers, you really will own nothing and be so happy. What could possibly go wrong? Why would anyone not want this utopian dream that is baked into the Great Reset to unfold? So the Great Reset will soon become the Great Handover. So much to look forward to. Keep paying your taxes, folks. Back over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Richard. And finally, when subscribing, please don't forget to press that little bell and also select the all option, or you won't get any notifications when I publish a new video. And thank you all so much for taking the time to watch the show.